Alright, so let's talk about real zeros of polynomials. So first we're going to talk about long division of polynomials. So when we do long division of polynomials, what we're dividing by will be on the outside, just like when you do regular long division. And then what you are dividing will go underneath. And these can be lengthy, and you need to make sure that you are being tidy as well. Now, if you are missing any terms, my advice would be to put a 0 in that spot. So if I didn't have this 16x, but I had the x squared and this number at the end, I would need to put a 0x right there as like a placeholder. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the 6x cubed and divide that by x. Now, I like to do my work out to the side just so I don't mess up, and it's easier to find my work. So 6x cubed divided by x would give you 6x squared. That's going to go on the top here, just like we do with normal division. And then after you do that, you multiply. So 6x squared times x would give you 6x to the third. Those should always match because you literally just divided. And 6x squared times negative 2 would give me negative 12x squared. So after you've divided and you've multiplied, go ahead and subtract. So if I'm subtracting both of these, I'm just literally going to change the signs. Because if I subtract a negative, that's going to be a positive. And then you're going to combine those terms. So these two should always cancel. Negative 19x squared plus the 12x squared is going to give you negative 7x squared. Now, if I have two terms out here, I should have two terms here when I divide. So I'm going to drop one more term to give me two terms. And then I'm going to start this process all over again. So negative 7x squared divided by x. Alright, so negative 7x squared divided by x would be negative 7x, and then that goes behind that term that you had on top, and now you multiply that term times both of these again. So negative 7x times x gives you negative 7x squared. Again, that first term should match. Negative 7x times negative 2 is positive 14x, and then it's time to subtract. So this now becomes a positive, and this will become a negative. The first two will cancel. 16 minus 4 gives me 2x. Now I have a third term to drop, so I'm going to drop the negative 4. Always make sure you take the sign that's with that. And then we're going to go through the whole process again. So 2x divided by x. That gives me 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 2 here, and then multiply. 2 times x is 2x. Remember, those should match. And 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. And then I'm going to subtract, so this becomes negative, this becomes positive, and I'm going to get a remainder of 0. Now, notice, nothing drops. I don't have two things here. Once you don't have two things that you can divide by the two things out here, then you're going to go ahead and stop, and whatever you have left is your remainder. So this divided evenly, which means my answer is 6x squared minus 7x plus 2. Now, also, we do have a restriction on our domain. Since we have an x in the denominator, we don't want a 0 down there, so we have to think about what numbers we could plug in for x that would give us a 0, and that would be 2. So 2 minus 2 would give me a 0 in my denominator, so x cannot be 2. If you can't figure out what that number is, you can always set that equal to 0 and then solve for your variable, and then that number that you get in the end is the number that would give you a 0 on the bottom. So x cannot be 2 because of that reason. Alright, so I'm going to put the x minus 5 outside, and then what I'm dividing goes on the inside. So I have x cubed minus 4x squared minus 25. But remember, I told you if you're missing a term, you should put a placeholder there so that you don't forget about it. Alright, and then I do this process again. So x cubed divided by x is equal to x squared. That goes on the top, and then I multiply. X squared times x is x cubed, and x squared times negative 5 is negative 5x squared. Then I'm going to subtract, so that makes this a negative and this a positive. So when I add these together, negative 4x squared plus 5x squared is just x squared. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop down the 0x, which seems kind of pointless, but I promise you, you don't want to mess up and not have your placeholder. All right, then I'm going to divide again. So we have x squared divided by x. That gives you x. So that's going to go on top here. And then multiply x times x is x squared. And x times negative 5 is negative 5x. If I wouldn't have had that, if I wouldn't have had the placeholder there, then I probably would have tried to put it with the 25, but those aren't like terms, all right? So it's always good to have that placeholder. Then I'm going to subtract, so this becomes negative and this becomes positive. These two cancel, and 0 plus 5 is 5x. And then I'm going to drop down one more term so that I have two terms here with the two terms here. Then I'm going to divide through one more time, so 5x divided by x, which gives me 5. I'm going to add 5, and then multiply 5 times x is 5x, and 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. And then I subtract. This becomes negative. This becomes positive, and I get a remainder of 0 again. So I have x squared plus x plus 5 is my answer. But I do have an x that I'm dividing by, so x cannot be 5 because 5 minus 5 would give me a 0. All right, so on number 3, same thing. I'm going to put the x plus 4 on the outside. I'm starting with an x squared here, so I don't need to worry about a placeholder because I'm not missing anything after that. So I have 3x squared plus 19x plus 28, and then I'm going to do my dividing. So 3x squared divided by x, that would give me 3x. And then I multiply. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 4 is 12x, and then I will subtract. So both of these become negative. These cancel. 19 minus 12 gives me 7x, and then I'll drop the next term. And I have nothing else to drop after that, so this is the, we'll only have two rounds here. So 7x divided by x, which gives me 7. That goes back here. 7 times x is 7x, and 7 times 4 is 28. I will subtract, so I get a remainder of 0. So let's say right here, if I had like a 7, then my remainder would be 7, and I would put it over what I'm dividing by. So it would be like 7 over x plus 4. That would be at the back of like my 3x plus 7. So if this is like a leftover that was 7, it would be plus this, and you'd have your remainder back there, just like with normal division. All right, so if you have a remainder, it's going to go on top of what you're dividing by. And then I'm going to look at this, and I realize x cannot be negative 4 because negative 4 plus 4 would give me a 0 in the denominator. So we've already talked about this, all right? What you get as an answer is your dividend, or what you start with is your, I'm just all messed up. The dividend is what you're going to divide, and the divisor is what you're dividing by. And what you get out in the end is your quotient, all right, with your remainder, okay, which we just talked about. So I've got my divisor, and I have my dividend. Now, notice I started with an 8x cubed, but I'm missing the x squared and the x, so I'm going to put placeholders in those just in case I need them. Every now and then you don't. And then I'm going to divide, so I have my 8x cubed divided by 2x. That gives me 4x squared. That goes on top. And then multiply 4x squared times 2x is 8x cubed. And 4x times negative 1 is negative 4x squared. So notice these line up. That's good. Now I'm going to subtract. So this becomes negative and this becomes positive. These cancel and I get 4x squared. And I'm going to go ahead and drop that 0x. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide again. 4x squared divided by 2x. So the 4 divided by 2 gives me 2 and then x. So that goes behind. And then I multiply 2x times 2x is 4x squared. And 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. Then I'm going to subtract. So those change signs. And I get 2x. And then I'm going to drop the minus 1 and divide again. 2x divided by 2x. That is equal to 1. So plus 1. And then multiply 1 times 2x is 2x. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Subtract. And I get a remainder of 0. So this will be my answer, but x cannot be 1/2. Now if you set this equal to 0, you would add 1 and divide by 2, so x can't be 1/2. Half of 2 is 1. 1 minus 1 gives me 0. So that would be your whole answer right there. Alright, this one is long and hideous. So I've got the x squared plus 2x minus 3. That's my divisor. It's going on the outside. This is not in order, so you need to make sure you put it in order. So I have my 2x to the 4th, and then my 4x to the 3rd, and then the negative 5x squared, and then the positive 3x, and the minus 2. And we divide. So I've got 2x to the 4th divided by x squared. That gives me 2x squared. And then I multiply, and I have 3 things to multiply to this time. So 2x squared times x squared would be 2x to the 4th. 2x squared times 2x is 4x to the 3rd. And 2x squared times negative 3 is negative 6x squared. Then I'm subtracting, so the signs of all of these will change. And I'll combine. So these actually both cancel out first, and I just get x squared. Now I need 3 terms here in order to divide by these 3, so I'm going to drop 2 terms down since I had 2 canceled the last time. And then I'll only have to do this one more time. So x squared divided by x squared, which is 1. And then I multiply. 1 times x squared is x squared. 1 times 2x is 2x. And 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. Change signs. These cancel. 3x minus 2x is an x, and negative 2 plus 3 is a 1. That is my remainder. So the answer would be 2x squared plus 1. And then since I have 2 terms, I'm going to put a plus here, and then the x plus 1 is going to go over my divisor, which is x squared plus 2x minus 3. All right. So I have a 1 plus 3x out front. If you don't like that, you can do the 3x plus 1, and I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put this in order. I'm also going to make sure that my dividend is in order as well, so I should start with this 6x to the 4th, and then the minus 3, or minus x cubed, then the minus x squared, then the plus 9x, and then minus 3. And then I divide 6x to the 4th divided by 3x, and this time I'm just going to write it up here as 2x to the 3rd. All right, then I multiply. So 2x cubed times 3x is 6x to the 4th, and 2x cubed times 1 is 2x cubed. Then we subtract. So I'm going to change both signs. This one cancels, and this gives me negative 3x cubed, and I need 2 terms, so I'm going to drop down 1 more term. Then I divide through again. Negative 3x cubed divided by 3x would be a negative x squared. And so negative x squared times 3x would be negative 3x cubed, and negative x squared times 1 is negative x squared. Subtract, so I'm going to change the signs, and I end up with no x squareds left, and I need two things, so I'm going to drop the next two things. If I didn't have two, then the next one drop down would be my remainder. All right, so 9x divided by 3x, that gives me 3. 3 times 3x is 9x, and 3 times 1 is 3. I'm going to change my signs and combine. These cancel, and this gives me negative 6, so that is my remainder. So I would end up with 2x cubed minus x squared plus 3 with a remainder of negative 6. So that would be minus 6 over 3x plus 1. All right, synthetic division, I can do this as long as I have a linear term here, okay? So like an x minus 2 or an x plus 3, as long as this x value has a degree of 1, okay? So it's just kind of like a shorthand way of doing this. So when you do these, what you're going to want to do is take that bottom and set that equal to 0. And that's going to give you the number that you put on the outside of this box. So I'm going to put negative 3 on the outside of an L-shaped box. You need about 2 lines here. And then I'm going to go through and take all of the coefficients from all of my numbers. So I'm starting with x to the 4th. There's a 1 in front of that. But I'm missing the x to the 3rd, so I should put a 0 in that spot. And then I have negative 10x squared, so negative 10. Negative 2x, so negative 2. And then I've got my constant, which is 4. You always need to make sure you have that 2. So I'm going to drop the 1, and then I multiply. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. And then I'm going to add 0 to that, which would give me negative 3. And then I multiply that times negative 3, which gives me 9. Plus negative 10 is negative 1. Times negative 3 is 3. Plus negative 2 is 1. Times negative 3 is negative 3. And then I add that together, which gives me 1. And this number is my remainder. Now, since I took an x to the 4th and I divided that by something that was an x to the 1st, then I'm just going to subtract those, 4 minus 1, which means this is going to start with an x to the 3rd. If you looked at all of the previous ones we did, if I took a 6x to the 4th and I divided that by a term that had a degree of 1, I ended up with an x to the 3rd, so it was just decreased by 1. Or here, I started with an x to the 4th and I divided by an x to the 2nd, which gave me an x to the 2nd as my first term. So on all of these, since they're all going to be linear when you divide, you're just going to decrease that by 1. So if this term is the x to the 3rd, this would be x to the 2nd, this would be x to the 1st, and this would be no x. So my answer would be x cubed minus 3x squared minus x plus 1 plus my remainder, which is 1 over what I divided by, which is x plus 3. So if I set this equal to 0, I'm going to get a negative 2. I'm starting with x to the 3rd, so I should have everything that comes after that. X squared, x to the 1st, no x. So I've got 5, 8, negative 1, and 6. So I drop the 5 and multiply. That gives me negative 10 plus 8, which is negative 2, times negative 2 is 4, plus 1 is 3, times negative 2 is negative 6, plus 6, which gives me 0. So I don't have a remainder. So if I started with x to the 3rd and I divided by an x to the 1st, I just subtract that. That gives me the next one. So that would be x to the 2nd, x, and no x. So my answer would be 5x squared minus 2x plus 3, and no remainder. All right, so if I set this equal to 0, I would have a 2 on the outside of the box. I started with x cubed. Make sure you have an x squared and an x and no x. So I have 2, negative 8, 13, negative 10. Drop the 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Plus a negative 8 is negative 4. times 2 is negative 8, plus 13 is 5. 5 times 2 is 10, plus negative 10 is a remainder of 0. So if I started with x to the third and I divided that by a degree of x to the first, this would be x to the second, and then an x, and then no x. So my answer would be 2x squared minus 4x plus 5. And that is how we do the long division and the synthetic division.